30 days from now, one of these children is supposed to disappear, and somehow I'm the only person in this house who knows it. That was the first clear thought I had after waking beneath silk sheets that probably cost more than my old apartment's yearly rent. My second was that this definitely wasn't my bedroom. Black marble walls rose around me, morning light spilling through windows nearly 15 foot tall, and somewhere beyond the closed door came the measured footsteps of people who sounded like they had scheduled for breathing. My name was Ethan Parker. I was 24, painfully ordinary, and the last thing I remembered was falling asleep after reading an Omegaverse Mafia novel whose ending had annoyed me enough to keep me awake past midnight. Now memories that weren't mine crowded my head. A mansion, a marriage contract, 2 children, and Damien Cross. The bedroom door opened before I could decide whether screaming would improve the situation. Damien stepped inside wearing a charcoal suit, every detail immaculate, from his dark hair to the silver watch at his wrist. He didn't need to raise his voice to make the enormous room feel smaller. This was the man the book had called the Cold King of the Cross family, an alpha whose reputation could silence a boardroom before he ever took his seat. Unfortunately, according to the memories now tangled with mine, he was also my husband. His gray eyes moved to the bruise near my temple, then returned to my face. "You're awake. Not hello. Not are you okay?" Apparently, romance was thriving. "Looks that way." I managed. Something changed in his expression, so briefly I almost missed it. Suspicion. The Ethan whose body I now occupied had never joked with Damien. In fact, he'd barely tolerated Damien's children and had spent most of this marriage demanding money, status, and freedom. Worse, I remembered exactly what happened to him in the original story. He betrayed Damien. Damien discovered it. Their marriage ended in ruin. I needed to avoid that future, preferably without announcing that yesterday I had technically been someone else. A tiny sound came from beside the bed. I looked down. 2 frightened blue eyes stared at me from beneath the bed frame. A little boy, maybe 3 years old, was hiding there clutching a stuffed rabbit. Jamie Cross. My borrowed memory supplied the name, but the novel supplied something worse. Jamie was one of Damien's 2 young heirs. His older brother, Noah, was 5. In 30 days from today, an event would tear this family apart. I slid carefully from the mattress and crouched several feet away, leaving enough space for Jamie to decide whether I was safe. "Hey, buddy," I whispered. "You don't have to come out." Jamie's fingers tightened around his rabbit. Behind me, Damien went completely still. "Jamie," he said. The boy flinched. That tiny reaction told me more about this mansion than any chapter ever had. Everyone here knew how to protect these children. Nobody seemed to know how to make them feel protected. I remembered the story's timeline, and suddenly my own survival wasn't the thought making my heart race. 30 days. That was all I had. Whatever role this world expected me to play, villain, unwanted spouse, disposable Omega, I was changing the ending. I looked at Jamie beneath the bed and made myself a silent promise. This time, both little heirs were making it home. Jamie did not come out from beneath the bed for another 10 minutes, and Damien did not leave either. He stood near the doorway with the patience of a man accustomed to waiting people out, while I remained on the carpet several feet from Jamie, pretending my knees were not beginning to complain. Eventually, the stuffed rabbit appeared first, followed by a cautious little hand, and then a mess of light brown hair. Jamie crawled into the open and immediately backed away when I shifted. That reaction hurt more than I expected. The borrowed memories inside my head offered fragments of explanation. The previous Ethan had never been openly cruel to the boys, but indifference could leave its own scars. He had treated Noah and Jamie like inconvenient furniture belonging to a marriage he resented. I could not undo that history by acting kind for 10 minutes. Trust would have to be earned. At breakfast, I finally met Noah. He sat at the far end of a dining table long enough for 20 people, his small shoulders unusually straight, his blonde hair neatly combed, and his expression far too serious for a 5-year-old. Jamie sat beside him. Damien took the chair at the head of the table. I chose a seat across from the boys instead of beside Damien. A housekeeper served eggs, toast, fruit, and pancakes arranged with the precision of a luxury hotel. Nobody spoke. Even the silverware seemed too nervous to make noise. Jamie stared at a strawberry without touching it. Noah watched me watching him. "Are you sick?" he finally asked. Damien's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. "Not anymore," I said. Noah narrowed his blue eyes. "You are different." Children were terrifyingly observant. Maybe I needed to be. His expression did not soften. "What do you want from Dad?" There it was. Not "Why are you being nice?" "Now do you like us?" "What do you want?" I glanced toward Damien. His face remained unreadable, but his attention had sharpened. "Nothing," I said. Noah clearly did not believe me. Everybody wants something from him. Then I guess I could be unusual. Jamie finally reached for the strawberry. I smiled, but did not comment, afraid attention would make him retreat again. Noah leaned closer. "Are you going away?" The question caught me completely unprepared. According to the novel, yes. The original Ethan would eventually betray this family and disappear from their lives. But before that happened, another event was coming. 30 days had become 29. "Not today," I answered carefully. Noah looked disappointed by the uncertainty, and I hated myself for giving it to him. After breakfast, I found the boys in a playroom larger than my old apartment. It contained shelves of expensive toys, miniature cars, puzzles, books, and an elaborate wooden train set. Yet the room felt strangely untouched. Jamie sat alone, arranging blocks by color. Noah was reading beside the window. No nanny sat with them. No parent joined their games. They had everything except company. I picked up a children's book and sat on the rug, keeping several feet between us. I was thinking about reading this. I said, "You can listen if you want." Noah did not look up. Jamie did. I began reading anyway. 5 minutes later, Jamie had moved a little closer. 10 minutes later, he was sitting beside me. By the final page, Noah's book had quietly lowered. When I finished, Jamie placed another story in my lap without saying a word. From the hallway came the faintest movement. I glanced through the open door and caught Damien standing there watching us. His expression was controlled, but his eyes were not cold anymore. They were suspicious. That was when I understood my next problem. Saving these children meant changing the story, and Damien Cross had already noticed that his wife was no longer behaving like the man he married. Damien started investigating me before lunch. I knew because subtlety apparently meant something different when you own a mansion full of security cameras and employees trained to notice everything. Wherever I went, someone seemed to appear nearby with an innocent reason for being there. The housekeeper reorganized flowers while I made grilled cheese for Noah and Jamie. A security guard inspected a perfectly functional window while I helped Noah finish a puzzle. Damien's assistant, a quiet beta named Reed, somehow needed 3 separate folders from the library while I searched for children's books. By dinner, I was almost impressed. I was also worried. In the original story, Damien trusted almost nobody, and the previous Ethan had given him plenty of reasons for that. Changing too quickly had painted a target on me. So I stopped trying to look harmless and concentrated on the reason I needed to change anything at all. 28 days remained. Somewhere inside this enormous house, the chain of events leading to Noah's disappearance was already beginning. I remembered only fragments from the novel. A family dinner, a glass of apple juice, Noah becoming suddenly ill, a canceled school trip, a replacement driver arriving several days later. Then everything went wrong. The book had treated those details like background information. To me, they were clues. That evening, I entered the dining room and froze when I saw Noah reaching for a glass of apple juice. My pulse jumped. Wait. Every face turned toward me. Noah pulled his hand back. Damien's eyes sharpened immediately. Why? I had no answer that would not make me sound insane. I crossed the room, picked up the glass, and smelled it. Nothing seemed unusual. "I think the juice might be old," I said. Damien looked at the unopened bottle sitting in an ice bucket. "Terrible excuse." "It was delivered this afternoon," he replied. Then I'm suddenly very passionate about expiration dates. Noah stared at me. Jamie giggled. Damien did not. He lifted one hand, and Marcus stepped forward. "Have a check." My stomach tightened. Less than 20 minutes later, Marcus returned. His calm expression had disappeared. There was something in the bottle that should not have been there. It would likely have made the children sick. The room became completely silent. Damien looked at Noah, then at the juice, then at me. "Take the boys upstairs," he told Marcus. Jamie resisted immediately. "Ethan comes too." 3 words should not have affected me so much. I crouched beside him. "I will be there soon. Go with Noah." Jamie hesitated before offering me his stuffed rabbit. I accepted it like he had handed me something priceless. Once the boys were gone, Damien closed the dining room doors. He did not shout. Somehow that was worse. "How'd you know?" I guessed. "No." He walked closer, stopping several feet away. "Yesterday you barely knew what Jamie liked for breakfast. Today you knew there was a problem before anyone else noticed it." I tightened my fingers around the rabbit. Maybe I'm paying attention now. Why? That single word carried more suspicion than an accusation. I thought about telling him some version of the truth, but how could I explain another world, another life, a novel in which his family's suffering had been entertainment? Because nobody else was, I said quietly. Something shifted behind Damien's eyes. For 1 second, he looked less like a mafia boss and more like a father realizing how close he had come to failing his children. Then the walls returned. "From now on, you do not leave this property without security." That sounds suspiciously like an order. It is. He turned toward the door and stopped. "Ethan." I looked up. "Whatever game you are playing, I will discover it." After he left, I stared at Jamie's rabbit in my hands and remembered the timeline. I had prevented the illness. That meant the school trip would probably happen now. The original chain of events had already changed. I had saved Noah from one danger, but I had also erased the only future I knew. 28 days remained, and from this moment forward, the book could no longer tell me what happened next. The first thing I learned about changing the future was that the future did not appreciate being corrected. 3 days after the juice incident, Noah's school confirmed that that field trip would proceed exactly as scheduled because he had never gotten sick. In the original story, that illness had kept him home. Now I had removed the obstacle that once protected him, and the realization followed me through the mansion like a shadow. I asked Damien to cancel the trip. He studied me across his desk for several silent seconds. Why? I had expected the question. I still had no convincing answer. Because something feels wrong. Damien leaned back. "You knew about the juice before anyone else. Now you're concerned about a school trip scheduled months ago." His voice remained calm, but his gray eyes missed nothing. "Tell me what you know, Ethan." I could not. Instead, I asked him to trust me. That might have been the most unreasonable request anyone had ever made of Damien Cross. Surprisingly, he compromised. Noah could attend, but Damien doubled security and assigned Marcus to supervise the transportation himself. On the morning of the trip, Noah stood near the front entrance wearing a blue backpack almost half his size. Jamie clung to my hand because he was furious that being 3 years old apparently disqualified him from visiting the Children's Science Museum. I crouched to straighten Noah's jacket. "Stay close to Marcus." Noah sighed with the exhausted patience of a 5-year-old dealing with an unreasonable adult. "I know. And do not go anywhere with someone you do not recognize." "I know. And if anything feels strange, Ethan." Noah suddenly hugged me. I forgot the rest of the sentence. It lasted only a second before he stepped away, visibly embarrassed. "I will come home," he promised. Those words should have comforted me. They did not. 2 hours later, Marcus called. The museum trip was proceeding normally, but the school had received a message claiming Jamie needed to be picked up from home and brought to Noah because of a family emergency. My blood went cold. The story had changed its target. I found Jamie in the playroom building a tower from wooden blocks. "We are staying together today, buddy." He smiled and handed me a red block. Minutes later, Damien arrived home unexpectedly. He crossed the foyer with Marcus beside him. His usual controlled expression replaced by something far more personal. Fear carefully locked behind discipline. "Where's Jamie?" "With me." Damien did not stop walking until he saw his son. Jamie looked up from the floor. "Dad, something remarkable happened." Damien crossed the room, knelt, and pulled Jamie into his arms. Jamie went completely still before slowly wrapping both arms around his father's neck. I turned away, suddenly feeling like I was witnessing something private. Then Marcus's phone rang. Noah's group was returning early. Everyone was safe. The breath left my chest so quickly I had to sit down. Damien noticed. Of course he noticed. Later, after Noah was home and both children were asleep, I found Damien standing outside their bedroom. "You changed something," he said quietly. My heart stumbled. What? Whatever happened today was supposed to happen differently. You knew enough to be afraid, but not enough to know Jamie would become the target. I stared at him. He had reconstructed the truth from pieces I had never intended to give him. "I cannot explain it." "Then explain this." His gaze held mine. "Why are you protecting my children?" There was no accusation this time, only confusion. I thought of Jamie's rabbit, Noah's sudden hug, and two little boys who had learned far too early not to expect adults to stay, because they deserve someone who chooses them. Damien looked through the open doorway at his sleeping sons. When he spoke again, his voice was almost unrecognizable. "They had someone once." I waited, but he said nothing more. He walked away, leaving me with the first glimpse of a grief the novel had never bothered to explain. That was when I understood something important. I had been so focused on saving Noah and Jamie that I had forgotten Damien was part of this family, too. Damien came to breakfast the next morning, and judging by Noah's expression, this was apparently more shocking than anything that had happened all week. Jamie stopped chewing his pancake. Noah lowered his spoon. I stared at Damien as he calmly took the chair at the head of the table. "Good morning," I said. "Morning," he replied. Jamie leaned toward me and whispered loudly, "Why is Dad here?" Damien heard him. His face did not change, but something in his eyes did. "I live here," he said. Noah considered that answer. "You never eat breakfast with us." Silence settled over the table. Damien looked at his son as if Noah had presented him with a problem no amount of money or influence could solve. "Finally," he said, "I am eating breakfast with you today." Jamie accepted this immediately. Noah did not. I understood both reactions. Over the next several days, Damien began appearing in places where the children actually lived instead of simply making sure they were protected from a distance. At first, he was terrible at it. When Jamie asked him to help tie his sneakers, Damien stared at the laces with the concentration of a man diffusing an impossible puzzle. When Noah wanted him to inspect a cardboard spaceship, Damien asked what its maximum speed was. "It is cardboard," Noah said. "That does not answer the question," Damien replied. I laughed before I could stop myself. Damien looked at me, and for one strange second, the Cole mansion felt almost normal. That evening, Jamie demanded a bedtime story from his father. Damien selected a book about a bear looking for home and read every sentence in the same serious tone he probably used during business meetings. Jamie loved it. Noah pretended not to listen from his own bed, but his eyes never left Damien. After both boys fell asleep, we stepped into the hallway. "You are improving," I told him. "At reading, at being here." His expression tightened. "I have always been here." Physically, Damien looked back through the doorway. After their mother died, Jamie cried every night for almost 6 months. His voice was quieter now. Noah stopped crying completely. I said nothing. This was the grief he had almost revealed before. "I thought stability was what they needed," he continued. "Security, routine, people who could care for them properly. They needed you. I know that now." 3 simple words, and suddenly the man beside me seemed less untouchable. I kept thinking that if I stayed distant, they would become strong enough not to depend on me. Damien's jaw tightened. The truth is, I was afraid they would depend on me and then lose me, too. There it was. Not coldness, fear wearing an expensive suit. I looked toward the bedroom, where Noah and Jamie slept beneath a night light shaped like the moon. "Children do not become stronger because nobody lets them need anyone," I said. "They become stronger when they know someone will still be there when they wake up." Damien's eyes settled on me. "Is that why you changed?" The question caught me off guard. Maybe I finally understood what mattered. He studied me for a long moment, but this time there was no suspicion in his gaze. "Jamie asked if you would still be here for his birthday." My chest tightened. His birthday was 6 weeks away, beyond the 30-day point that had once terrified me. "What did you tell him?" "I did not know. You could have asked me." Damien stepped slightly closer, though he kept a respectful distance. "Then I am asking now. His voice softened. Will you still be here? I should have thought about the original story, about everything I still did not understand, about whether this world would even let me stay. Instead, I looked at the two sleeping boys and then back at the alpha who was finally learning how to stand beside them. Yes, I said. For the first time since I arrived, Damien smiled. Damien's smile should not have stayed in my thoughts for the next 4 days, but apparently my brain had stopped accepting sensible instructions. Something between us had shifted after that night. He still disappeared into meetings behind closed doors, still carried the quiet authority that made employees straighten when he entered a room. But at home, he was becoming someone the original story had never shown me. He started returning before dinner. He remembered that Jamie hated peas and that Noah preferred his sandwiches cut into rectangles instead of triangles. Once, I found him sitting on the playroom floor in a suit that probably cost several $1,000s while Jamie covered his hands with washable dinosaur stamps. The feared Damien Cross looked at me with absolute resignation. Do not say anything. I was going to compliment your style. Noah laughed so hard he nearly dropped his book. Those moments were dangerous in a way I had never prepared for, because they made forgetting temporary things far too easy. Then, 18 days after I arrived, I remembered the next major event from the original novel. Evelyn Hart, a 26-year-old Omega from a respected family who entered Damien's life after helping the Cross organization resolve a complicated business dispute. In the book, Evelyn was described as Damien's destined partner, the person whose calm intelligence eventually reached the man everyone else feared. The story had been very clear. Damien was supposed to love Evelyn, not me. 2 days later, Marcus announced that Evelyn Hart would attend a private dinner at the mansion. My stomach sank despite every logical argument I gave myself. This was good. The story was correcting itself. Noah and Jamie were safer now. Damien was becoming closer to them, and perhaps my purpose here had almost been fulfilled. That evening, Evelyn arrived wearing a navy coat and carrying a gift for the boys. He was polite, intelligent, and genuinely kind, which somehow made everything worse. Damien treated him with professional respect. Noah liked the science book Evelyn brought him. Jamie liked the cookies. I smiled through dinner and told myself the strange pressure in my chest was relief. Afterward, I went upstairs and opened the desk containing the previous Ethan's personal documents. The marriage agreement allowed me to leave with generous financial support if Damien approved the separation. I did not want the money. I only wanted to make leaving simple. I began organizing the papers. Planning something? Damien's voice came from the doorway. I turned too quickly. His gaze dropped to the documents. The warmth I had grown accustomed to disappeared from his expression. You are leaving. It was not a question. Eventually, you told me you would stay. I said I would be here for Jamie's birthday. That is not what he thought you meant. His voice remained controlled, but disappointment made it heavier. That is not what I thought you meant. I looked away. Things are changing. Because Evelyn Hart had dinner here, my silence answered for me. Damien stepped inside. What does Evelyn have to do with our marriage? Nothing yet. His eyes narrowed. I had said too much. Ethan, you keep speaking about my life as if someone already wrote it. My heart stopped. Damien continued before I could respond. You knew Noah was in danger. You knew events were changing. Now a man visits my home once, and you start preparing to disappear. He stopped several feet from me. Tell me what you believe is supposed to happen. I could not give him the truth, but I could give him part of it. You were never supposed to love me. For several seconds, Damien simply stared. Then his expression changed, not into anger, but something almost wounded. Who decided that? I had no answer. He looked at the separation papers, then back at me. I spent years letting other people decide what my family needed. I will not make that mistake again. His voice softened, and neither will you. From a hallway came small footsteps. Jamie appeared clutching his rabbit with Noah behind him. Jamie rubbed his eyes. Ethan, you promised a story. I looked at Damien. He said nothing. He did not need to. I closed the desk drawer over the separation papers and followed the boys toward their room. But one frightening truth followed me down the hallway. I was no longer afraid the original story would take this family away from me. I was afraid I had already started wanting them to be mine. The photograph was hidden behind a row of old financial records in Damien's private library, and I only found it because Jamie had decided his stuffed rabbit needed a treasure hunt. I had followed a trail of wooden blocks through the mansion until one rolled beneath a cabinet. When I reached for it, my fingers brushed a small leather box pushed against the wall. Inside was a photograph of Damien standing beside a smiling woman with baby Noah in her arms. I recognized her immediately from the borrowed memories. Claire Cross, Damien's late wife and the mother of Noah and Jamie. Behind the photograph was a folded letter. I should have put it back. Instead, one sentence stopped me cold. If anything happens to me, do not let Damien believe it was an accident. My pulse quickened. The original novel had described Claire's death in less than a page. A tragic car accident 2 years before the main story. Damien became colder afterward. End of explanation. But Claire's letter told another story. In the weeks before her death, she had noticed unexplained changes in household schedules, security assignments altered without Damien's approval, and private information reaching people outside the family. She had suspected someone close to Damien was quietly isolating him. Then I reached the final paragraph. The children are not the real target. Damien is. I read it twice. Suddenly, details from the novel rearranged themselves in my mind. Noah's illness, the attempted pickup involving Jamie, Damien's growing distrust, even Evelyn Hart's arrival. I had assumed these events were separate pieces of a predetermined romance. What if they had always been connected to something else? Where did you get that? Damien stood in the doorway. I slowly raised the letter. Every trace of color left his face. Behind the cabinet, he crossed the room and took it carefully, as though the paper might disappear if he moved too quickly. His eyes traveled across Claire's handwriting. For the first time since I had known him, Damien looked completely unguarded. I never saw this. I believe you. He sat down. She told me she was worried before the accident. I thought grief had made me invent meaning afterward. His voice tightened. Everyone told me there was nothing to investigate. Everyone. The word stayed with me. Who handled the investigation? Damien looked up. Someone I trusted. Before he could say more, Marcus appeared at the door, unusually tense. Damien, we found something. He placed a folder on the desk. The security changes connected to the juice delivery and the false message about Jamie had both been authorized through credentials belonging to a senior member of Damien's organization. Someone who had served the Cross family for more than 15 years. Damien opened the folder and his expression hardened. Victor Hade. The name struck something inside my borrowed memories. Victor had appeared throughout the original novel as Damien's loyal advisor. He was always present when Damien became more isolated, more suspicious, more ruthless. The story had framed Victor as the reasonable man trying to control an impossible boss. I suddenly understood what I had missed. Maybe the book had never lied about events. Maybe it had lied about what those events meant. Damien closed Claire's letter in his hand. You knew parts of this before I did. Only parts. And you thought Evelyn was destined for me. I nodded, because that is how the story went. He studied me. But instead of demanding an explanation, he asked, and what does your story say about Victor? I searched every memory I had of the novel and felt a chill of realization. Almost nothing. Damien understood immediately. The man blamed for everything had received entire chapters. The man standing quietly beside him had barely been questioned at all. From upstairs came Jamie's laughter, followed by Noah telling him to slow down. Damien looked toward the sound, then back at Claire's letter. For years, I thought protecting them meant trusting fewer people. I moved beside him. Maybe it means trusting the right ones. His eyes met mine. Are you one of them? Weeks ago, I would have hesitated. This time I did not. Yes. Damien nodded once, accepting the answer with a weight that felt almost like a promise. Then Marcus's phone rang. He listened for several seconds before looking at us. Victor Hale had disappeared, and he had taken confidential records with him. Whatever ending I remembered was gone now. For the first time, we were not trying to change the old story. We were facing a future nobody had written. Victor did not threaten us. He did something smarter. By sunrise, confidential Cross records had reached 3 rival organizations. 2 major investors had frozen negotiations, and a federal compliance inquiry had been triggered against one of Damien's legitimate companies. Victor had spent 15 years learning exactly which thread to pull so the entire empire would begin unraveling without anyone raising a hand. Damien stood in his office, surrounded by ringing phones and anxious advisors, while I watched him become the man from the original story again. His shoulders went rigid. His voice turned cold. Every emotion disappeared behind control. "We can contain this," Marcus said, "but we need you downtown. The board is meeting in 40 minutes. Another security officer entered. We also intercepted a message connected to Victor. He knows where Noah attends school and Jamie's usual medical appointments. The room changed. Damien looked toward the ceiling as if he could see through 2 floors to where the boys were eating breakfast. Marcus lowered his voice. "If you leave now, we can save most of the business." I knew this moment, not the details, but the shape of it. In the original story, Damien had faced a crisis that forced him to choose between protecting his empire and staying with his family. He chose the empire because he believed power was the only thing keeping them safe. That decision pushed everyone farther away and gave Victor more control. Damien reached for his coat. My heart sank. Then he stopped. "Cancel the meeting." Marcus stared at him. "Damien, if you do that, we could lose millions. Then we lose millions. The board could remove you." Damien set his coat back down. "Then they remove me." Nobody spoke. Damien looked at the security officer. "Close every schedule Victor had access to. Change the boys' school arrangements. Suspend all unnecessary travel. Nobody enters this property unless Marcus personally clears them." Then he turned to me. "Where are Noah and Jamie?" "Breakfast room." He walked out. I followed him downstairs, still trying to understand what I had just witnessed. Noah was building a tower from toast, while Jamie carefully placed blueberries on top. Damien entered, and both boys looked up. "Dad, you are late," Noah said. Damien sat beside them. "I know." Jamie offered him a blueberry. Damien accepted it. His phone began ringing. He switched it off. That tiny movement felt louder than every alarm upstairs. "What happened?" I asked quietly. Damien looked at his sons before answering. "For years, I believed the Cross organization protected this family." Victor understood that belief better than anyone. He knew I would sacrifice everything personal to preserve the machine. His gaze moved to me. He was wrong. Later that afternoon, Marcus brought better news. Because Damien refused to follow the response Victor had anticipated, several traps hidden inside the leaked records became obvious. Evelyn Hart had also discovered irregular transfers connecting Victor to shell companies used to manipulate Cross finances. By evening, Victor's influence was collapsing. Damien had lost contracts, money, and possibly his position on 2 corporate boards, but the house was secure and the children were safe. I found him after sunset on the back porch overlooking several acres of dark lawn. "You changed the ending," I said. "Apparently, I learned from you." I smiled. "I did not tame you, you know." Damien raised an eyebrow. "No, you were still terrifying." "Good. You just finally figured out what deserves protecting." His expression softened. "So did you." He reached into his coat and handed me the separation papers I had prepared. They were unsigned. "I found these again this morning." My stomach tightened. "Damien, if you want to leave, I will not stop you. You will have money, security, whatever you need, but I will not pretend it is what I want." I looked through the glass doors. Noah was helping Jamie arrange toy cars across the living room rug. For weeks, I had been measuring my life against a story that no longer existed. Damien followed my gaze. "What do you want, Ethan?" Before I could answer, the grandfather clock inside began striking midnight. The sound froze me. 30 days. The deadline for the original story had finally arrived. The room tilted, the lights blurred, and somewhere impossibly far away, I heard a sound I recognized from another life. My old alarm clock ringing. I opened my eyes to the ceiling of my old apartment. For several seconds, I could not breathe. My alarm clock was screaming beside me, exactly as it had on the morning before everything changed. The paperback novel lay open on my nightstand. My cheap curtains glowed with early sunlight. There was no mansion, no Damien, no Noah arguing about sandwich shapes, no Jamie placing a stuffed rabbit in my hands. I grabbed the book. The pages were blank. Every single one. Then memories from the other world began fading around the edges, and panic hit me harder than anything I'd felt there. No, please. I closed my eyes and thought of Jamie asking if I would stay for his birthday. Noah promising he would come home. Damien standing beside his sons instead of choosing an empire. I had spent 30 days believing returning here was supposed to be my happy ending. Now, this apartment felt like the place I had escaped from. The alarm stopped. Silence filled the room. Somewhere inside that silence, I heard Damien's voice asking the question I had never answered. "What do you want, Ethan?" "I want to go home," I whispered. The moment I said it, I understood that home was no longer this room. The sunlight disappeared. When I opened my eyes again, Damien was holding my hand. I was on the back porch floor with Marcus nearby and the mansion lights glowing behind them. Damien's controlled expression had completely vanished. "Ethan." His voice broke around my name. I sat up and immediately looked through the glass doors. Noah and Jamie were there, both safe. Jamie saw me move and ran outside. Noah only a step behind him. They wrapped themselves around me so tightly that I started laughing and crying at the same time. "You scared us," Noah said. "I know." Jamie buried his face against my shoulder. "Do not go away." I held both boys closer. "I'm not going anywhere." Damien crouched beside us. As I searched mine, what happened? I had a choice, and I looked at him, then at the children. I came home. Damien closed his eyes for one brief second, as if those words had released something he had been carrying for years. 6 weeks later, Jamie celebrated his 4th birthday beneath hundreds of blue and silver balloons. Victor's scheme had collapsed after Marcus and Evelyn turned the evidence over to the proper authorities, and Damien permanently stepped away from several parts of his old empire. He kept the legitimate businesses, but he stopped measuring security by how much power he controlled. The mansion changed too. Noah's drawings appeared on refrigerator doors. Jamie's toys invaded rooms once reserved for formal meetings. Breakfast became mandatory whenever Damien was home, mostly because the boys declared it so. One morning months later, I found Damien at the kitchen table, trying to answer an important business call, while Jamie decorated his sleeve with dinosaur stickers. Noah was beside me doing homework. "Papa," Noah said, pushing his worksheet toward me. "Can you check this?" I froze. He had never called me that before. Noah froze too. "I mean, Ethan." My eyes burned. "Papa, esse fine." His shy smile nearly destroyed me. Across the table, Damien quietly ended his call. "You hung up on somebody important," I said. "I am a boss." Jamie looked up. "Not here." Damien stared at him. Noah started laughing. I joined him, and even Damien surrendered. Later, standing together on the porch, he handed me the old separation papers one final time. "Still want these?" I tore them in half. Damien smiled. "That answers that." I rested my head against his shoulder while Noah and Jamie chased each other across the lawn. Once, I thought I had fallen into someone else's story. I was wrong. Stories end when the final page is written. This was a life, imperfect and unpredictable, filled with ordinary mornings, children's laughter, second chances, and people who had learned to choose one another. I had crossed an impossible distance looking for a way back. In the end, I found something better. I found a place where I wanted to stay.